And we're on.
Okay.
Good afternoon, I guess. We're joined to discuss Israeli investments in the Emirates. אני רק אגיד את זה שנייה בעברית. And also we'll be switching around. אנחנו בשידור חי שעוסק במוסף המיוחד של גלובס, המדריך להשקעות למשקיע הישראלי באמירויות. איתי נמצא דני זקן, שהוא בעצם מעורכי הפרויקט והפרשן לענייני הערבים של גלובס. Danny, do you want to introduce our participants?
Sure. As you can see, we have, let's start with the ladies, of course. We have Tali Zinger, which is a businesswoman that have a lot of deals, or had and have and will have a lot of business connection and others in the Emirates and in the Gulf in general. And she was my guideline for the recent weeks since the announcement of the agreements about what's going on there business-wise. And we have Dr. Tariq Al-Hindi. Yes, he's the general manager of Abu Dhabi Investment Office, which is one of the key offices or parts of business, doing business in the Gulf, in and out. And you're probably going to explain more about that. And of course, Karen, yourself, Globes editor.
I'm an editor in the digital department, and also Columbia alumni, so as well as Tariq. Same years also, we just found out.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So we're going to talk about how, first of all, I guess I should say there have been investment connections with the UAE in previous years, right, Tali?
Are you asking me or are you asking Tariq?
I'm asking Tali, and then we'll go to Tariq, and Tariq says he can take it away.
Sure. So absolutely, there has been investment over the years. There have been business transactions over the years, primarily in the digital and cyber, some in the Homeland Security as well. What we see in the last few months, I would say, and certainly in the last 6 weeks, is an ability to actually have those transactions happening in a much more clear, straightforward way. And I think it removes a lot of the complications. You know, it's hard enough for two people who live across the street from one another to engage in a direct business transactions. It's even more clunky when you have to deal with all kinds of holding companies and legal structures to enable a transaction in the previous lack of normalization. So this is really a game changer in freeing up the opportunity for just direct meeting of interest and really allowing more participants in both parts of the market, both in the Gulf and the UAE in particular, and in Israel, to access those transactions.
Yeah, and Dr. Tariq, if you can yourself define the change in terms of what has been and what's going to happen, what opened, basically, what are the doors that are open now?
So I think one of the key parts that's changed, and thanks for the question, is that one, the conversations have changed, right? And I think this is the important part of things, right? There's no longer this discussion around should or shouldn't we. It's about how do we structure it? How do we make it happen, right? And I think that's an important component to how it is that we're trying to drive this. And I think we've seen in the last few weeks, a lot of the conversations we're having with folks are around, can we do this and can we do this now, right? So there's almost an impatience in terms of trying to get this done, because I think a lot of business folks, I think a lot of the people in power have mapped out where the opportunities are. And it's just been a question of how soon can we take advantage of that? And the Abraham Accords, I have to say, have really been a game changer, not just between the two countries, but then everybody else looking at how it is that you can sit at the same table and have this conversation with one another and really make things materialize. So we're looking at this across sectors. We're looking at this along new relationships as well as existing relationships, right? I mean, I don't know many people that have not engaged with an Israeli counterpart or someone in the US and so on. I mean, my personal experience, and I know this was mentioned earlier at Columbia, is like, I have a lot of Israeli friends, Israeli professors, right? And so this is something that I think now we're able to materialize and do something quite constructive with. So it's been very positive from my perspective. I'll give you a quick example of this. Tali and I were introduced through a mutual friend. And I was like, listen, Tali, I don't have too much time today because you're here on a short trip, but we have to meet. And I think we sat in the office for about, 4 hours having a discussion. I mean, we met at lunchtime, and then by the time the sun set, we realized what time it was. And that's an indication of the types of opportunities that exist just between two people having a conversation. So this is something I think on an exponential level will start to really pick up pace in the next few months.
What are the steps you're about to make? You said you're considering establishing an office in Israel?
We are. So we're looking at an office in Tel Aviv. We're putting together the plans right now to make sure that that is done in the very near future. We're engaging with a lot of institutions, both our counterparts on a government level, but then also from a private sector perspective, talking to people like Tali, talking to people that have these relationships between both countries and have had them for a very long time and are now looking at how it is that they can convert that into material change. And I think this is the key component for us is how do we take all of this curiosity? How do we take this narrative? How do we take these conversations and actually turn it into people and technology on the ground in both countries? And I think this is where we're spending a lot of our time right now in terms of engaging with various institutions in Israel.
Dr. Tarek and Tali, one by one. There is a game changer. I see that strategically, geopolitically, and name it, it is a huge game changer. The thing is, how does it going to happen practically? What we saw now is a wave of interactions, of emails, meetings, and other stuff. How is that going to be more? Will it be more governmental in the side, from the side of the Emirates and from the Israeli side? Is that going to be more government oriented, or is that the private sector that's going to be the main connector between the two country business wise?
So I'm happy to answer first, Tali, unless you want to have a go, but you tell me how you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I look at that as it's twofold, right? I think one, the governments are the ones that have pushed this agenda. They've made sure that the politicians in this decision to formalize relationships have made that first, have connected that first bridge. I think now it's incumbent on the private sector, with the support of the government initially, right, on both sides, to understand how it is that you navigate both countries. And I think this is where the point that I was making earlier about engagement with the right institutions, with the right government entities is going to be critical. Now, how do you turn that into something material? And the way that we do that is we have to look at it by sector. I think that there are sectors where we're quite advanced in and we want to expand. And then there are sectors where we believe that there are technologies in Israel that can help us expand those particular sectors. And vice versa. The same applies to Israel as it relates to our ability to contribute. So I can pick it sector by sector. I can look at the private sector players in each. Some are at very developed and advanced stages. An example of that is the recent transaction or an agreement between G42 and Rafael, right? This is a very, very big transaction as it relates to establishing the private sector's involvement with one another in support or with the support of the government as the main backer of some of these institutions. So policy, regulation, capital, and opportunity are what's going to drive this. And I think it differs in each sector, but there's equal excitement across all sectors.
Danny, I see that there's a question in Arabic that I can't read. Can you read it and maybe translate for us?
Maybe Tarek will.
So if I may chime in on that same question, I think while Tarek is translating the question, I think it's important for the different Israeli companies that are looking to engage with the ecosystem that Tarek described. I mean, it's exactly right when you think about the involvement of government, but really to figure out if your industry is more suitable for, the top-down engagement in strategic sectors that are of core interest to the government, or if this is, distribution of a certain product that has its counterpart in the private sector. And that navigation really matters, because if if you're knocking on the door of government, whether it's financial institutions or development organizations, or groups like the one that Tarek heads of Audio, you have to know what you're really asking of that entity and that you actually fit with what the strategy. There's this amazing opportunity with the alignment of what the UAE has explicitly articulated as strategic goals and the appendix to the Abraham Accords, right? It's a beautiful mapping and similarity in interests. And I think that companies that see their role in those strategic areas would be really well suited to navigate a strategy that's affiliated with kind of government taking the lead, and other companies that see a big opportunity in accessing the UAE market or selling directly or distributing directly or beyond to the GCC, and even more so outside the GCC to the 2 to 3 hour time zone difference and large reach of the UAE might pursue a different approach.
Yeah, I think, Tali, that is it's a very important point that you bring up, because I think this isn't just about the relationship between Israel and the UAE. This is about the wider context in terms of the reach into the region. And let's not forget, Bahrain has also come to the table and signed an agreement as well. And I think this has been very positive for the momentum that this is picking up. The thing I would like to add, as it relates to the comment that was mentioned, but the thing that I would like to add here is that I think all of the advancements that we've made so far, whether they be political or whether they be in the private sector through private sector engagement, is that we're taking a very forward-looking approach to things, right? All of these relationships that we're trying to work on, none of this is short-term transactions. These are all long-term, resilient relationships that we're trying to build, which is the way that we've approached this. And if you look at the way that Abu Dhabi has really built its relationships on a global level, over the last 49 years, we're turning 50 next December, inshallah, so that's a big milestone for us as a country. But if you look at what it is that we've been able to accomplish, and I know that I've mentioned this before to some of you, there's a reason why we hold the #1 travel passport in the world. I can access more countries visa-free with the UAE passport than any other passport holder in the world. And that is because of the long-term relationships that we try to build, irrespective of the differences that may exist, because we have to be forward-looking. And that, for us, is the most important part of what we're doing. And this was the 3.5 hours that Tali and I spent together having this discussion, was how do we build those long-term resilient relationships?
But we have to get into politics a little bit. I know that you're not a politician. Nonetheless, you are in a high rank that should maybe talk about it a little bit, because politics said that until now, in the recent 10 years, and of course even before, the relations were behind curtains, were low profile, were through third country business and other options, and that was because of course the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, which now it looks like it's put aside. Can the Gulf countries, including Emirates, ignore that issue, or is that always in the background?
I think, sir, the best way for me to answer that question is to look at how it is that all of us have benefited on a global level from either technology or resources that exist in both countries, whether it be the R&D and the health tech or fintech that has come out of Israel, or the fact that we have massive downstream and advanced material industries here, as well as oil, and how it is that every country has been able to benefit from this for its economic development. I think that when you look at that purely from an economic perspective, we are already in a relationship with one another, right? I think when you start looking at the human aspect of things, sir, this is where I think nobody can ever forget what the human aspect of things is. And I think that there is a discussion for everybody to have, and you can only have that discussion if we're sitting at the same table with each other. And so we view this as a success for multiple reasons, primarily because it allows us to cement those bridges that we've built, but also because it puts us together with decision makers, whether they be policy or private sector, to be able to get things done. And that for us is the most important part of this, sir.
So you're saying it's kind of a bridge, something that maybe even will put the Palestinians together, first business-wise, and maybe after that, political-wise.
I think, sir, if you look at, I spent many years in New York and been to quite a few hospitals there for different reasons, whether it be family or friends or so on there. We all benefit from being associated with one another, right? There are technologies in the health space that doctors in New York use on a daily basis that Arab patients are recipients of, right? So we are connected in many ways that I think now we realize from a formal perspective, we can now build those bridges and not forget about different causes everywhere. The UAE has always been a very generous country, both financially as well as with time and the political narrative that we have in terms of trying to make sure that we help people sit at the same table and resolve issues. And that will continue to be the case for the foreseeable future.
There are a few questions here that I want to put forward. One is about the interest, if there is an interest in traditional industries, agriculture, like non-tech.
So I think it's all a question of where each one of those industries are at in their life cycle. Today, if I look at what has been done, agriculture is a great example. Today, if I look at what has been done in the UAE over the last 10 years, you have a very small country, very arid climate. If any of you have been here in the summer, you'll understand why it's hard to grow crops outdoors, right? But we have over 35,000 farms in the UAE, 24,000 of which are based in Abu Dhabi. So what we've tried to do is adopt technology. We've tried to adapt it for what it is our particular climate requires, but it means that we need more partners. It means that we are still not at the stage where we can say we're efficient, we're environmentally friendly as it relates to water usage, even though we've come a very long way as it relates to how irrigation was done in the past versus today. But in general, I think we, as the Abu Dhabi Investment Office, we don't hedge our bets, if I can use that phrase, on any particular technology. We want to make sure that every technologist is able to come and experiment here on a de-risked basis so that we can try to identify what works best for us when you localize that technology. So agriculture is a core industry for us. Industrials is a core industry for us. Clearly oil and gas, petrochemicals, so on. But now also healthcare, financial services, and other sectors that we can elaborate on in much more detail should your viewers choose to hear that. But again, it's all about how it is that we proceed and what partners we proceed with that are going to help determine how successful we are with each one of these traditional industries and sectors.
I think that can't be emphasized enough. Like, I think that it's very easy to say, oh, I have this company, let me go, it's a new market that's open, let me go try to get it into the market. And I think that, Tark's framing of it really matters on what this current stage of development of that particular sector and that particular line. It just cannot be emphasized enough in terms of kind of the homework that needs to be done. And then there's a tremendous amount of opportunity, as Tark has said. I think that figuring out where, for business people watching this and thinking about this, it's where is your company, your industry vis-a-vis that same industry or that same vision of the industry in the UAE.
If I may, I'll add one final point to that. I think the way that we look at this is we've gone through all these sectors. We've looked at them both at a sector level as well as at a cluster level, and we've identified where the opportunities are, what stages of development we are in each one of those sectors, and we have that information ready. All we want to do now is engage with the private sector in Israel and say, look, if you're interested in this particular field, here's where it is that it stands, here's where the opportunity is, and here's how the entire ecosystem works as it relates to this. And oh, by the way, we have financial incentives to help you materialize that ambition that you have for growing your business outside of Israel. And I think that is a very important aspect of what it is that we have to offer.
There's a question that I want to a question from the people, from those that watches us, about the role that Israeli Arabs can have in that business or the new connection in all terms in that in what's going on now, what's going to happen now. And I'm interested in that specifically too, because I've been asked that question a lot from our friends here, And I think Tali can elaborate about at least one of them that is already doing business with the Emirates and the Gulf. So maybe one word about that. The question that I've been asked is a lot about the doctors, paramedics, nurses, etc. If there'll be a need for those in general in the Emirates and the Gulf.
The easy answer for that is that we already have over 200 different nationalities based in the UAE. I know the UN identifies officially 196 or 197, but we've got over that because when you include some of the other jurisdictions, right? So we're already very welcoming. For us, it's quite simple. I don't look at someone's nationality or their background. I look at what it is that they're trying to create. I look at how ambitious they are, and I figure out how it is that I can help that ambition succeed. And I know that sounds cliche, and I've had people say that, wow, that sounds too good to be true. And then what we do is we actually deliver. We've just signed up, in April we had, in the midst of COVID, right? You had multiple transactions that occurred in Abu Dhabi, whether it be ADNOC with the $20 billion plus oil and gas transaction, or us deploying over $100 million into AgTech with a further $30 million to be announced shortly, as well as some other larger transactions that we're working on. It's very clear to us that it's all about your drive, your ambition, what it is that you want to create, and we'll welcome you here. And that's one of the nicest things about being in the UAE. And please, don't take it from me. Ask Tali. She's been coming back and forth to the UAE for years, right? It's very easy to come to the UAE. It's very easy to get set up here in terms of visas and so on. And we can help make it easier, right? But the important aspect of this is that we want to hear from people that have those ideas, the technologists, call them what you want, and we want to help them set up here and plug them into the established companies in the ecosystem that can help them grow. So that for us is critical to the success of Abu Dhabi, the UAE, going forward.
Tali, if you want to talk about MAS and what's going on that section.
Sure. So I'm definitely familiar with a couple of quite successful Israeli Arab business people who have over the years managed to really create a good name for themselves in the GCC. What I see happening increasingly in the last 2 months, a month and a half, is there's this interesting role of the kind of a bit of a cultural translation, right? There is some value to the adaptation of the local market. Now, cultures are different across the region, right? Culture in Nazareth or Jat is different from culture in Abu Dhabi. But I think there's some value to it, whether it's on a linguistic or a culture adaptation. And I think that time and again, even in the context of the success of Israeli Arab business people there, it does come back to, well, what can you actually offer in the UAE market? So maybe in the past, the specific personal connection and the willingness to, take a risk and do business with people where there wasn't full normalization weighed much larger than the what can you actually deliver. I think the equation has become very clearly, okay, what can you deliver? How are we complying and how are we really reaching our goals based on what you can provide? So we've seen a lot of openness in the past with different kinds of framings. And I think that now it's a much more results-oriented approach. And I think it's a huge opportunity for Israeli companies that know how to deliver and Israeli professionals that know how to deliver, regardless of where they come from in the Israeli demographic landscape.
Okay. Investments.
This was a very, very optimistic, I guess, discussion, right?
Yeah, I think,
but it is, right? It has to be optimistic. I think if we approach this with reluctance or hesitation, I don't think that we're going to learn as quickly, irrespective of what the may be, right? I just don't think we'll learn as quickly. And so in all of our conversations that we've been having, and we've met with a lot of Israeli groups, individuals, government folks, and so on. It's been quite eye-opening in terms of where it is that where opportunities have already been identified, and where it is that we believe they can happen.
Optimism is a very important word here. The thing is that we are in time which is it's a hard time. It's the COVID-19. It's the economical crisis here in Israel. political crisis too, lots of demonstrations against the government. So when we had that newspaper Thursday, Friday, in a weekend about the Emirates, we got some criticism. People criticized us because they said we are kind of, what's going on? What is all this optimism? What is so there's something in this criticism, but on the other hand, as you said, the optimism is in place, meaning there are a lot of things that we can achieve in the way. So let's go for investments. First of all, when we talked, you said something about bilateral, going both ways, meaning what? If you can explain.
I mean that opportunity should never be, I think the value in every opportunity should not sit with one party. That's what I mean. And I think that where it is that we've seen this is that whilst a financial transaction may be one direction, the other side of the transaction needs to also have some sort of accretive value add component to it, whether it be the technology exchange, whether it be research and development, whether it be the advancement and development of our sectors. And I'll go back to agriculture here because I think it's important. And this is an area that was highlighted quite extensively in 2020 as it relates to the necessity to work with each other, even if your borders might be closed to the world, right? And every country had this approach. When we look at this, we say, okay, look, there are financial incentives, there are investments that we can make where we know it'll be capital flowing one way, but we'll be able to address the food security issues that we have. That for us is massively value accretive. If I can, at the same time, check the boxes around technology transfer, R&D, and the development of and upskilling of the base, the human capital base here, then I've had a very successful transaction. The same applies the other way. We've received interest from Israeli entities looking to make investments in the UAE, and we're having those discussions because there are many things, for example, real estate. I've had this discussion with a lot of Israelis saying, listen, I can't believe that you can make 7-8% in real estate in the UAE and we're just at 2% in Israel. When can we invest, right?
We're going to discuss real estate specifically in the following panel.
Fair enough. So again, there are these opportunities where we believe that the exchange of capital can work both ways. Our primary focus and our leadership's primary focus today is how do you put innovation at the core of everything that we're doing. And again, I know, and I'm using the term multiple times, I'm not trying to sound cliche here. All of our policy decisions, many of our investment thesis are built around, one, how do I bring that innovation here? But two, how do I make sure that my local population have different opportunities once they graduate from university, and that I'm able to provide an attractive platform for the foreign world to come and be based here. And that's as clear an answer as I can give on that particular area.
I think we should move towards finishing and moving on to the next panel. But there is one question which I do want to ask, and someone is asking, how do we go about starting to interest people in the UAE in investing? He's specifically asking about high tech, but I guess it's a general question.
I think Tali should answer that too with Tariq.
Yeah, Tali should answer that.
Yes.
Maybe actually, Tali, you should answer this one first. I do have an answer, but it would be a bit of a funny answer, so I'll let you answer that first.
Okay, so after you call Tariq's office and figure out if it's relevant for them, then I think you engage in a deep dive of research in understanding who could be relevant partners, right? An Israeli company that's looking to, is a year and a half away from planning their IPO and is focused on the US market. Are they going to find their investor in the UAE? Maybe, but then they would want to ask, why haven't they raised that investment already in the local market or in their target markets? So I think it's a matter of focus and figuring out, why am I investing? Why am I trying to raise investment from the UAE? And once that question is clear, because I think it's relevant for me to be there, I think opening up an office of shared R&D can put me in a leading position vis-a-vis frontier markets, for example. right? That thesis of why am I seeking investment from this audience has to be clear, like in any market, right? You wouldn't show up in Silicon Valley and try to make a case for something that's not relevant for that market. I think that's really the first stage. And the second is figuring out the stage of growth of the company. Is it relevant for the stage of investor that you're talking about? And I think that the third, in addition to a big sense of humility that they are being bombarded by many companies from around the world, especially Israel these days, is a realization that there's a lot of market education that has to happen on both sides. Okay, there's interest. I think that folks have understand in the kind of high level of what general industries are leading in Israel, but the deep dive of what's the role of government, what's the role of academia, what's the role of accelerators, incubators, the VC landscape, military, and what are the leading startups? How does the ecosystem work here? There's a lot of market familiarity that needs to happen. So I don't think it's a jump, picture device, picture technology, like you would in other markets that have already been swimming around in the Israeli ecosystem. And I think vice versa, right? So there's kind of this ecosystem familiarity. I know Tarek's office, Audio, has been doing a webinar next week. Dubai is going to be doing a webinar in the next few weeks. So I think it's take the time to learn and then seek to participate. If you're one of these companies trying to raise investment, seek to participate in those conversations, in those webinars, learn who the different players are, and seek to be a part of those conversations that help actors in the UAE map the Israeli ecosystem.
It's an important tip.
And I think Tally answered that question on my behalf. Just reach out to us and we'll let you know. We'll give you all the information that you need, specifically around the sectors, but more importantly about connecting you with the ecosystem players. I think that for us is important because we have to, on both sides, I think, have a very constructive vetting process so that we understand where the opportunities are, who the serious players are, how quickly it is that we can engage with each other and convert that engagement into contractual relations with one another. And that's what it is that we're trying to build on. So please reach out to me. I would say reach out to me on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn recently froze my account because I had so many people adding me on requests. And as I went through trying to accept them, they said I must be using some sort of software to do it, and they cut me out of my own account. So I've got to figure that one out. But anyways.
That's funny. So thank you both, Tarek and Tali. Danny's going to stick around with me, and we're going to move to talk a little bit about the real estate, which I guess is a big thing for Israelis everywhere, and a new market is opening up. So thank you, and optimism is not a bad thing.
Thank you
Thank
both.
you very much.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah, we will be in touch.
Bye, we'll be in touch.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
ביי, טלי. היי, דני.
שלום, שלום.
אני מצרפת אלינו עכשיו את גיא נרדי, שעשה בעצם במסגרת הפרויקט, ככה קצת חקר את ההיבטים הנדלניים של האמירויות, וגם ועכשיו אני אעבור לאנגלית בחזרה, סיימון בייקר, is also joining us. Hi, Simon. How are you? Thank you for your patience.
Hello, good afternoon. Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
I can see that there are a little bit of sound issues with you, which is strange. Maybe stick around with the mic. We're going to be talking a little bit about the real estate options that are out there for Israelis. But before we start, I wanted actually Guy to tell us a little bit about what's special about real estate investments and how is it different from what we know as real estate investments in Israel? Guy, okay. He's going to talk in Hebrew.
אני חושב בוא נגיד שלו היינו ממליצים למשקיע ישראלי לחפש השקעה נגיד בישראל, כן? איך לעשות כסף בישראל מהשכרת דירות, כן? באופן טבעי היינו הולכים לאזורים שבהם ערכי הדירות נמוכים, ושיש תשואה גבוהה מהשכרת דירות, על יד אוניברסיטת באר שבע, ברוב הדלת בבאר שבע, בנווה שאנן בחיפה, לא יודע, בארמון הנציב בירושלים. אני חושב שבאיחוד האמירויות, לפי התחקיר הקטן שעשיתי לצורך הכנת הכתבה, השיטה עובדת לגמרי אחרת. זרים בדרך כלל ממוקדים באזורים מאוד מאוד מסוימים, אלה לא האזורים העניים, לא האזורים החלשים, בוא נגיד שיש סיכוי שיעברו איזשהו סוג של ג'נטריפיקציה, אלא דווקא אזורים חדשים, יפים, שיש בהם את כל ה-amenities, אתם יודעים, הדרושים, סופרמרקט וחדר כושר, נוף לים, אני חושב אלה הדברים השונים מאוד, כאילו, לעומת ישראל, במובנים של השקעה בענייני נדל"ן.
Simon, who are the people who are, when you have a real estate agency in Dubai, right?
Correct, yeah, that's right. So we're estate agents who are dealing with, all aspects of the property market over here in Dubai. I myself have been here for about 15 years now, coming from London originally. And so as a company, we have about 120 staff over here and look after all aspects of, property management. We've got a holiday company, so all different aspects of real estate over here.
Who invests in real estate in Dubai? From where in the world?
I mean, to be honest with you, obviously we've got two sides of it. So we've got all the people that we sort of sell and rent properties to locally, who are, again, from all over the world, expatriates living in residence in the UAE. And then on top of that is investment. We get people from all places all over the world. I sometimes get my brokers telling me that they might have a passport from somewhere they've never heard of before. So we literally all over the world. People investing, from all four corners of the world. For lots of different reasons. I'm sure we'll come on to a few of them in a minute.
Guy, did you check? Are there already investments of Israelis in real estate in Dubai? Do we know? Has it started already?
תראו, כרגע ישראלים, בוא נגיד, בעלי אזרחות ישראלית לא יכולים להגיע לשם. אתה צריך אזרחות זרה ואין טיסות ישירות מישראל. בוא נגיד שזה תנאי מקביל. וגם, בוא נגיד, גם הבנקים הישראלים שאיתם בדקנו, הם עדיין לא ערוכים לסייע לישראלים, אבל אני מניח שכל הדברים האלה יקרו מאוד מהר.
Should I speak in English or Hebrew?
Yeah, I think English.
Okay, so the answer is yes. And yes, for companies that have, the question, Simon, was about if there are already Israelis investing in real estate in the Emirates. And the answer is yes, for those that have international companies, for those that are in the hotels, that have companies of hotels, chains of hotels. And I think there was something I saw, I need to get deeper in that, something that related to the free zones in Dubai, that one of his Israeli company is invested already in one or two of them, even through a third company, I think from the US. So yes, already. But what's going to happen now is that Israelis, I think, will go, not that someone will go to buy an apartment in a house or in Dubai or Abu Dhabi. Maybe those that want, winter, summer for having fun with the family, because there are right there, Simon, there are some houses for vacation places in lots of places in the Emirates. But I think that the big companies, especially hotels and industry, are going to get into a little bit, because it's a market that is growing fast. Am I right, Simon?
Sorry, I think I've been muted, right?
No, you're not muted. You're not.
Unmuted, sorry, I'm going a bit slowly this afternoon. No, you're completely right. Look, I think, I'm sure there's already businesses who've invested, through holding companies and whatever. Individuals already have started making inquiries. I appreciate at the moment there's quite a tough lockdown in Israel, which has been making it difficult. We experienced probably similar a few months ago. We've already had individuals approaching us looking at direct investment, whether it be, like you said, a holiday apartment or maybe a house, or just something for a small investment to make, just as maybe dip their toe in the water first. Of course, we wouldn't expect anybody to rush and invest all their money in Dubai, but I think people who've we've spoken to one or two people who've got a large portfolio, and they're certainly considering coming here in the next few weeks to try one or two properties to start with.
Guy, you wrote, and you can say in Hebrew, and I'll translate it to Simon. You wrote about how to start, how to go about it for the Israeli investor. מאיפה להתחיל?
את שואלת אותי מאיפה להתחיל?
אני שואלת אותך ואני אתרגם לו.
תראו, יש אתרי אינטרנט מאוד מוצלחים, כאילו שמיועדים למשקיעים זרים, והם, זאת אומרת, כמובן שהמידע הוא באנגלית, ויש לך אפילו כאלה פטנטים שמאפשרים לתרגם את המידות, אתם יודעים, מפיט למטרים, ומהמטבע המקומי לדולרים, ככה, ולמטבעות נוספים. ככה שבעצם, בוא נגיד, יש הטכנולוגיה מאוד ידידותית למשקיע הזר. גם באתרים כמו Property Finder, שזה כמו מקביל ליד 2 הישראלי, אבל גם של סוכנויות תיווך, כמו זאת של סיימון, עובד ב-House and House למשל, שבאמת שהן מאפשרות באמת גישה לכל מיני נכסים שהסוכנויות האלה משווקות, ועד כמובן חברות יזמיות גדולות מאוד, שבונות שכונות או פרויקטים גדולים, שגם כן הן נותנות מידע על נכסים בפרויקטים שהן מקדמות.
So Simon, Guy wrote in the project about how to start and how there are, you can reach websites that teach you about what's going on. How would you go about it to someone who hasn't been, and perhaps it can take us a while before we can actually physically arrive to see?
Sure, and that's understandable. Unfortunately, at the moment with the lockdown, is I guess a few more weeks, isn't it? Which is tough. During our lockdown in Dubai, we were fortunate that the weather was good, so I was sitting in my garden for about 6 weeks, and when I occasionally got some peace and quiet from the 2 young children, we started writing an investment guide to Dubai, and in that we tried to include everything about Dubai property over the last 20 years. I mean, it's got quite a brief history, Dubai, in terms of the freehold property market, being less 20 years old, is very, very young. But it's a very interesting place, and it's very exciting that some of the developments that are being built here and the master developments being put together by the biggest developers here. The EMARs of this world, the government-backed developers in the UAE. It's quite incredible, really. So very, very exciting. I mean, I've been here luckily enough to do this here for 15 years, but from when I've come here till now, the changes are absolutely incredible. And it's a very exciting place for real estate that we probably take a little for granted living here. But some of the developments that you can come and see are amazing. So yeah, we have got this investment guide that I very happily send to anybody who would drop me a message or whatever. So that's fine. And that's one way to start having a read about the history of Dubai, all the different aspects of the major players in the economy here and this kind of thing. To try and help get an understanding before maybe you could visit and come and try come and stay for a week and have a look for yourself.
Do we have any more? Danny, do you have another question or why?
Can you tell us about the differences between like Dubai and Bahrain, or the Emirates and Bahrain, Simon, if you are?
I've been to Bahrain, been lucky enough to go to Bahrain a couple of times. I'm not too familiar with the property market there. It's not something that we specialize in. We really like to really specialize in just in Dubai, so we don't do anything in Abu Dhabi either. So I wouldn't want to compare the market too much. But yeah, so I'm not sure I can compare them directly. But Dubai as a place for real estate is exciting. The fact that there's no capital gains tax, there's no income tax. So the two big scary taxes.
What you're saying right now is important. That's the sort of stuff that we don't know.
Sorry? Yeah.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat the advantages of it?
Sorry, okay. So tax is a big scary word that I'm used to from London. Probably part of the reason that I chased out here to chase the sunshine and all the new towers being built. But there's no income tax, which means that obviously from whatever you earn as a salary, but also for whatever you earn as property income. So if I buy an apartment in Dubai and I rent it out to a tenant, I wouldn't be paying the government any tax on my income from that property. The other thing is if the property increases in value and I sell it, in London, as in most countries in the world, you would be paying a capital gains tax. In the UK, it's about 40%. I'm not sure what you could educate me on what it is in Israel. But so that is a huge factor for people. The fact that you're not paying any tax it really affects your return. I think you touched on earlier. It's possible to get 7 or even 8% rental returns here on residential property, which is probably unheard of in most places in the world.
And would you say that most of the investments that you're dealing with are foreign or local?
Probably about 50-50. So of course, all our leasing team, we've got a very big leasing team over here which handle all the property rentals. Because I think it's very important when if you come and buy a property, especially when it's for investment. The only reason that would stop me buying a property in a foreign country where I didn't live is not having somebody that's good on the ground to look after it for you. It's easy. Anybody can go and buy a property. You could contact anyone on the internet and Dubai real estate related, and they could sell you a property. What's the harder bit is to make sure that property is managed properly for the next 5 or 10 years. So we're really here, the feet on the ground, to look after it for the future, rent it out, make sure there's no problems with the maintenance and the management of it, all that kind of side of things.
From that 50% of foreigners, who would you say are the leading country?
The leading country, look, I mean, there's a lot of money coming from India and Asia direction, but Europe is starting to catch up. So recently there's always been quite a lot of Brits coming to Dubai. I think they're all just trying to get out of the UK usually, but we've had an increase recently in investors from Spain and Germany, 2 countries. France has always been another European country with quite a lot of expatriates moving here, not only investing here, but also moving their lives here, a lot because of the tax. They pay 50+% income tax, and a lot of the time that's a big factor for them to be relocating over here.
I must add something about the tax issue. There are discussions between the 2 governments for tax agreement. So I'm sure the Israeli government will find a way to get tax from the benefit, the revenue of Israelis in real estate.
I mean, possibly. I'm sure they're not going to single out any nation to be taxed against. I mean, it's always been a big attraction for UAE. I mean, even there's a value-added tax, VAT. They've only recently brought that in a few years ago, and it's at a very low rate at 5%, which is again to help obviously all the infrastructure of the country that requires a lot of money, doesn't it? And as a growing city and a growing country, I guess that's a requirement that was probably a necessary evil, I'm afraid.
How easy is it to get people that will take care of the real estate there? Meaning, I'm buying something and I need someone to, from cleaner to someone that will manage it. How easy is that?
Okay, so what I touched on a minute ago, that it's very easy to buy a property. So lots of companies over here will just sell the property, they take their commission, and then they say, oh, hopefully, he doesn't call me again. We've got a large property management team, and what they do is that they become your eyes and ears on the ground. So for a small fee every year, they will manage your property for you. So when there's an issue, let's say there's a water leak in the middle of the night, or something needs repainting, your tenant will be in contact with one of our property managers rather than yourself. So you can sleep easy at night knowing that you have peace and quiet, and hopefully that all the problems will be resolved, and any payments will be made directly into your bank account. Again, that's another topic. We can help investors open a simple savings account over here so that they can receive all their rental payments, and from there, obviously, they can take the money wherever they like. Right?
Yeah.
Do we have time for one more question?
Yes, we do.
As you can see, I'm on vacation mood. So if someone wants to rent a place like a vacation house for a month or so in Dubai area, Dubai itself has some resort area. So what will be the cost, the way to do it?
Okay, so I mean, there's two angles. Obviously, there's lots of nice 5-star hotels along the beach, and hopefully, at the moment, I'm sure with all the corona issues this year, you could probably get a good deal. So that's one aspect. The other side is if you prefer to rent an apartment, so like a holiday apartment, whereby you know for self-catering purpose, you'd have a kitchen and that kind of thing. We have a holiday company called House and House Holidays. And the lady Emma who runs that is ready to taking bookings for New Year already as well. So there are people coming on holiday still. Obviously, it's been a bit slower the last few months, but that's a way that if you wanted to rent a 2 or 3 bedroom apartment, maybe a villa with a pool or something, then those options are available as well. So both work.
Thank you. I want to ask one more question to Guy. בתחקיר שעשית, אם היית צריך לאפיין דבר אחד שהוא ייחודי באדריכלות, בעיר, זה מקום חדש יחסית, נכון?
אני חושב שגם אבו דאבי וגם דובאי, בוא נגיד, הם התפתחו ב30 שנים האחרונות, הם היו ערים קטנות, ואני חושב שגם סיימון סיפר לנו שב15 שנים שהוא היה שם הכל השתנה באופן משמעותי. אני חושב שמבחינת האדריכלות, מאחר שבאמת סקרתי הרבה אתרי נדל"ן, האדריכלות לא באמת שונה מהאדריכלות הישראלית. זאת אומרת, הפנטזיה המקומית היא לא מאוד רחוקה ממה שרואים אצלנו. כאילו זה מזכיר שכונות פה בערי ישראל. מצד שני, מרכזי הערים, האדריכלות היא הרבה יותר מרחיקת לכת, אפשר להגיד. אדריכלי על, הם שוכרים שירותים של אדריכלי על, מהטובים ביותר שיש כרגע בעולם, גם כחלק מניסיון למתג את עצמם, ולייצר איזשהו סוג של מצוינות תרבותית. העניין הזה הוא חשוב, וכל מה שקשור, ואת זה אפשר לראות, כל מי שמסתכל בצילומים של דובאי ואבו דאבי, אז כל ההתייחסות הסביבתית היא שונה לגמרי. אפשר לראות שם, בוא נגיד, בנייה בתוך הים של איים ולגונות, בתצורות שונות ומשונות, שפחות מקובלות פה.
So Guy was just telling us a little bit about the architecture and how it would actually seem similar to all of us here in Israel. I wanted to ask one last question to you, Simon. You've been living there for 15 years. You're raising your family in Dubai. What can you tell us that like we wouldn't know about the culture or the life that we wouldn't imagine? Because what we know is...
There's probably a few things. I don't want to talk to you too long, but Dubai is a very, very cosmopolitan city. So it's, there's over 80% of the population are expatriates. So you've got people from literally all over the world that call this place their home, and it makes it just a truly cosmopolitan place. And amazing diversity. For a place that's for such a young country, the place that it's got so much diversity, and you can go from the world's largest shopping mall, which I don't particularly enjoy going to too much, but all the way across. In 10 minutes you can be at the creek, and going across the creek in an old dhow, which is an old wooden boat. I mean, just the diversity of going through the old gold and spice souks. There's so much vibrancy to having so many different nationalities call this place their home. I think that's probably the big one, really. And in terms of a place to live, it's terribly safe and clean, and there's so many amazing restaurants and places to explore that I think anybody should come and listen. Don't worry about investing for a minute. Come and enjoy a long weekend maybe, or a week with your family, and then some winter sunshine. It's just getting into the perfect weather now. So it's definitely a place that should be at least checked out.
Okay, so I think we're running to finish this broadcast. There was one thing that I read in the I don't know how to even call it, the feature magazine about Dubai, about UAE. Tal Schneider was interviewing a rabbi, and he said that he thinks that a lot of Israelis are going to move and try to live for periods of time in the Emirates. I guess we'll need to see if that actually happens. Guy, Dani, אתה חושב שיש סיכוי?
כן, אני תמיד אופטימי. I'm always optimist.
Okay.
כן.
Okay, so thank you very much, both of you. The three of you, and Danny, thank you for being with me this whole broadcast. And people who are wondering, there are a lot of contacts already in the responses, and feel free to engage with us as well.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for having us. Yeah, it's much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you, Danny.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye.
להתראות. ביי.
ביי, להתראות.